What's going on, Founder University? I'm excited to share our episode today where I have the co-founder and CEO of Loop on the call today. His name is Cato, and he is an unbelievable founder working in a very complicated space. We cover everything from what it's like to operate a startup in a heavily regulated industry like the financial industry in Canada. We talk about the strategies of growing a lean team compared to raising VC capital and growing really quickly. We also touch base on AI and how it's affecting every industry and specifically the financial industry. So excited to bring the episode today. I think you're going to learn a ton. I learned a ton. So enjoy the episode. Speak soon. Cato, good to be connected. Thanks for jumping on. And I'm excited to connect because I originally spoke to you, which was funny. So usually how you don't get people on your podcast by telling them that you're using a competing software. But you guys are solving a real problem in Canadian banking specifically. So I'm excited to chat founder to founder about the Canadian banking system, which I'm blown away how shitty it is. But obviously you've been a founder and built a great company. I'm excited to hear your thoughts and strategies and sort of trade notes here to see if we can help each other out.
Yeah, for sure. Excited to be chatting today. Excited to kind of have this chat. I'm sure at some point I'm going to convince you to switch over to the light side and join Loop. But otherwise, excited to be here today.
There you go. I was expecting that. I was going to say if you didn't try to convert me over, you'd be a bad founder and a bad salesperson. But I would expect nothing less of you in your space, and it's super competitive. And it was funny thing. I was thinking about this before. Is you guys are in a really unique space, and for the listeners, and I'll give a heads up before it. Like Loop is, I guess, in your own words, like the better banking system for Canadians, giving them access to bank accounts in different currencies and different credit cards and wire transfers and FX fees and all that fun stuff. And I wanted to ask you a question sort of right off the bat, because in my mind, when you're in tech or building a tech company, usually you're competing against other tech companies, and that's really hard. But you guys are in a unique spot because you're actually battling like the old school banking systems and the new fintech companies that are coming up and trying to evolve this industry. Like from your perspective and how you sort of think about that, do you see them as like competitors? Do you see them as like enemies? Like how do you approach it? Are you against the big old bank systems? Are you against the new fintech companies? Like how do you guys think about it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I see the characterization as like, if you're into Star Wars, the fintech companies are the rebellion, and the big banks are the kind of legacy incumbent empire that we're all trying to take down. So in short, giving a more straight answer to your question, like I don't really see other fintech companies or companies that are trying to kind of build better solutions for end consumers or small businesses as competitors, because I think we're all kind of fighting the same battle at the end of the day. To just give you a statistic on it, which is, when I heard this, I was shocked. If you add up all the market caps of every fintech in the world, so if you add up the market cap of, think of the biggest companies, like the Robinhoods of the world, the Wealthsimples of the world, combined, and then you divide that by the market caps of all the banks in the world, that number is 2%. So meaning like the entire penetration of all fintech globally is 2% of global banking. And so that illustrates my point, which is the battle we are fighting is how do we get people to move away from institutions that have been around for 100 plus years and adopt new and modern technologies in an industry where trust is paramount. And people have never heard of you before, and you're trying to convince them to move their money to you. Like that's a very big challenge to undertake. But we do that by offering better products and services, better customer experiences, lower fees, and that's the way that you kind of win at the end of the day. So our ability to compete in this marketplace is driven not by the amount of money that we have or the amount of money that we spend on marketing campaigns, but rather by the service quality that we can deliver to our customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a crazy stat. I would have never thought about it. When you think of the Stripes of the world and stuff like that, is there's these massive billion-dollar companies. But I guess if you have like a multiple decade or a century head start, which these old banks do, then that's an easy way to build up a pretty big market share. So sort of chipping away 0.001% at a time. That's interesting because it's and the way that I think about it, and when I put my sort of founder hat on, is like you want to go into a market where it's obviously big enough to be successful and you can take a piece of it, where there's not a crazy amount of competition because it's really hard to stand out. But my biggest concern is like where it's not too much regulation. like that gives me nightmares of like how much regulation these are in these industries and legal procedures and stuff like that. Like, is that when you were thinking about Loop and sort of going back to the founding of this, like what was the thought process or how did you even think about to get into this business? And were those some of the concerns that you had of like, hey, you're going against these old massive companies, there's all these legal issues and red tape and stuff like that? Or how did you think about it when you even came to Loop? I don't know what the founding story was.
You're absolutely right. Like, the ability to navigate complex regulatory environments is critical to being successful if you're building a financial services company. Rightfully so, that there's a lot of regulation that governs financial services. I would say wrongfully so, a lot of that regulation isn't actually to protect consumers or businesses, it's to protect the incumbents. And so knowing how to navigate that, how to build the right relationships, how to affect change in that environment can become your competitive advantage. So it's one of those things where it's an environment that's incredibly complex and that makes it scary for a lot of people. But if you look at that as a way to create a competitive advantage, that is actually a way for you to create a mode of differentiation and not be an environment where you're competing against 100 other companies. I mean, like theoretically, to your point, we're talking about $1 trillion markets when we talk about things like payments, the payments industry, right? And so you would think that if in a $1 trillion market, there would be, 100,000 million companies competing in our space. The reality is that you have, a couple handfuls or a dozen or so companies that are competing in any given, particular financial services niche. And the reason for that is that it's not like you can just kind of open up a laptop, start writing some lines of code and start building.
Yeah.
So if you're able to navigate that, you get the ability to access and compete in these massive, massive markets, that are not just, 1,000 customers, but rather, 10 million customers that you can go out and target. But you're absolutely right. Getting the regulatory parts right is important. And that's why I would also say, as a founder, you have to be comfortable with that being a key part of your job. Like in many industries, like you think of legal compliance stuff as like, I'm not going to think about that. I'll worry about it later. Or like maybe we'll get big enough where I hire somebody to do this stuff. In fintech, you have to think about that stuff like from the day you found the company.
Yeah, you have to be a certain breed. Like I even thinking about it as an outsider, I get the heebie-jeebies. I have no interest. But I guess the way that you're spinning it and saying it to sort of summarize is like if you are okay with dealing that, and if you cross that chasm, then it actually can be good defense against competitors coming in and a competitive advantage. But you have to be willing to make that crossover because yeah, I'm scared of it. So I assume my other founders are scared of it as well. So if you can get past it, that could help. Um, and sort of going back, you said something which is really important, obviously, in finance is trust. And to put words in your mouth, you're trying to kill the big banks and take a lot of business for them. Like, what is your strategy to build that trust or build the first 100 customers, 1,000 customers, 10,000 customers? Like, how do you pull clients away? Like, what are your growth strategies and what have you found to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, look, like big banks are always going to say this. They build trust by building, gold and marble towers. So you kind of see the physical presence of them, and you're like, okay, like I can go and see and touch and feel this thing. And they've been doing that for a long time. That's worked for them. I think there's a new way of building trust, which is kind of through the product experiences and customer relationships that you have and developing product and technology that works for the end customer and is a lot more convenient, flexible, easy to understand, etc. Right? Like I think the one thing that well, banks have had all this money to spend on building those golden towers. What they have also fumbled is they've when you go in, they give you a brochure that's like 50 pages long with like size 4 font of like here's our terms and conditions and here's how we're going to charge you fees and we're going to charge you fees on those fees. And I think like people have gotten kind of tired of that being the dynamic of working with traditional institutions. And so, we can't build the gold towers, but what we can do is say, here's a really simple, easy to understand way as to how we work with you, how we're going to save you money, how we're not going to, have any surprises, hidden fees, things like that when you're working with us. And I think that's the way that you start to build trust with people. It's a gradual trust building process though, right? Like to your point, nobody is going to, and rightfully so, like just hear the name Loop and say, "Oh, I trust Loop," on day one. But I think what I hope is that they give us a chance, by using us for one product. Like for example, we have many customers who will open up a Loop credit card for their business, so they'll start using a credit card, and that's like a pretty low level of trust required to use somebody's credit card. It works well, they like it, they like the experience. After that, that starts to open up the possibility of, hey, I'm going to trust this institution or this company with more of my products and services.
Yeah. And is that your Trojan horse? Like, what is your actual strategy? Is it just like paid marketing spend on credit cards and cashback intrigues? Or like, I'm interested in putting myself
Mm.
in the consumer shoes or the business shoes of like, and I'll get into why I moved to one of your competitors and what my thought process was. But I'm interested for you, like, how do you even get the people's attention in the first place? Like, I come from a sales background, like cold calling, cold emailing. Is it paid ads? Is it going PR route? Like, how do you even get your name in front of the consumer to be able to give them a chance to give you trust? Like, what is your actual tangible strategy?
Yeah, I have somewhat of like a controversial take on this topic because I think there's a lot of fintech companies out there that have basically like what they say their differentiation is essentially just like a better product and UI. Like it's like the, user interface of their platform. I don't actually think that that is a good enough sales proposition to convert customers. I think like your product in some way has to be 10 times better than what exists in the market today. And in Loop's case, the area that we identified that we can make a material difference in is for companies who do business cross border. So if you're a business that pays vendors, imports products, etc., in other countries or other markets, or you're a company that needs to earn revenue in other countries, so you like sell products or services into the US, into the UK, into Europe, there is a ton of friction that gets created with traditional banks when you do those types of things, both in the terms of actually accessing products. Like it's very difficult to like even get a bank account in the US, for example. It's very difficult to get a credit card that lets you spend US dollars or spend British pounds. And also, when you do get those products, they're incredibly expensive with traditional banks. And so, what we've done is built a platform that is 10 times cheaper, 10 times faster to open those accounts, get access to those products. And that's kind of our go-to-market sales proposition and how we win business is when we know somebody is trying to make a payment internationally or get paid internationally, there is a huge opportunity for us to be like that much better for that end customer. Which, like I said, like, I think that's a much stronger sales proposition than just saying like, we do everything that, your bank does, but we have a nicer, app. Like that I don't think is kind of a long-term winning proposition.
Yeah, fair enough. And yeah, UI and UX is part of it. Like you have to have that, but that's not the differentiator. And you're preaching to the choir. So the reason I switched over and I was banking with TD is every month I would have to, and I do international wires for our business. Like I would have to walk to the branch. I would have to meet with them. And every single time they wouldn't have the wire, I send the same wires every single month. They wouldn't have the information on file. I'd have to bring paperwork. The manager would have to come put the approval through. I'd have to sign paperwork, and then I'd have to pay fees. And then alternatively, my clients in Europe or the US would send me money. When the money came in, I would get dinged with fees. And I was just losing money left, right, and center. I'm like, why? First of all, why does it take me an hour every single month to go send this wire? I send the same thing every month. I should be able to do it from a computer. But the second thing is like, why am I getting dinged for fees? Like, I just want to keep it in the local currency. I don't need to convert it. I don't need to like take wires in and out. Like just give me my money. And I switched over and immediately saved thousands of dollars from doing it. And it was a no brainer. But the reason I asked about the trust
Yeah.
before is like, I just didn't even know. I'm like, oh, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to bank with my bank. And I walked in
Yeah.
T, set up a business account. So yeah, it's interesting how you sort of get to that top of funnel. And my head goes and to sort of go the transition of acquisition and go to market, like that was my clue is like, I hate going to the bank every single month. I hate paying these wire fees. There should be like billboard ads for Loop outside of every single TD bank and be like, hey, are you sick of paying wire fees when you pay internationally? We'll do it for zero. And it's like super targeted because you guys are a unique situation. It's like you are looking for Canadian business owners frustrated with wire fees. Pretty easy to find them. They're going into the bank every single month. So not saying it's easy to convert them, but it's very nice to have that targeted pain point and to be able to convert them over. So now if you do it at scale is the hard thing, but that's where my head goes immediately is like, I had a very specific pain. I needed it solved. And if I saw Loop's billboard like outside of TD, I probably would have called you guys immediately because you're solving such an obvious pain point.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, and this is true for kind of all go-to-market. You want to get the customer at the point where they're feeling that pain most acutely, and you can sell them the antidote to that pain, right? And so that's very much like what I think about and what we think about when it comes to building out go-to-market efforts is like how do we reach people in those moments where they are about to incur a wire fee, they're about to get dinged with a 5% foreign exchange fee on the credit card, because by the way, that's what an average credit card from a bank charges you when you go to spend internationally is 5%. So when someone is going and making that purchase with an international vendor, how can we tell them, hey, don't waste 5% of your money, instead switch over to our platform. And so like that's very much like the way that we try to get in front of people. I like your idea on the billboards outside bank branches, because I hear that story time and time again of people are going into a branch to to send a wire. I've been there running a business in the past. Like I've had to go and do that. It's silly that's the case.
Yeah.
If you
So
want, if you want,
well, I'm interested to hear from you because I'm always thinking like other founders of like, do you have this target market? Like, how do you, what is your, like, how do
Mhm.
you get your customers? What is your channel of acquisition right now?
Yeah, I mean, transparently, our best performing channel is referrals. Like, so, like people telling other people about the product, because like you as a founder probably know and talk to other founders a lot, and you probably talk to other founders about the challenges and pain points that you might be dealing with. Whether you're out for a coffee or playing poker or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think like those conversations are usually where someone will say, "Oh, I just tried out this new product for my business." And I'm saving a bunch of money. And so like we've had some of our best customers have just literally like emailed us saying, "We love your product so much. Like here's like another company that I was just chatting with, and I told them how much money we saved last year with your platform, and they're here and they want to sign up." So I think like that's when you offer a product that creates that much incremental value, you have that ability to drive referrals. I'd say like expanding on that, we then started to think about how can we like turn that into an actual machine versus just relying on that happening organically. And so we started thinking about like who are the people around other people who run businesses or finance teams that advise them or consult them. So, who would like people like fractional CFOs or bookkeepers or other people that are in and around this space that are typically, the first person that you might call if you're like, hey, I have to go send a wire internationally, or I'm going to go to a conference and I've got to pay for it. That person that you're then going to call, like, how do we get them to be an advocate too, so that they can kind of be the person that refers Loop or tells you about Loop? So it's
Yeah.
starting to think kind of through that process of what are the places that you actually go to as a founder, and then walking through that chain to figure out like how do we insert ourselves into those conversations.
Yeah, and you need that social proof that people have used it and it works, and it's unbelievable. And in my business as well, and offshore staffing and recruiting, like that is our best channel right now as well as referrals. It's like one client is happy and they tell their friends, and it's unbelievable. In 2025, that like referrals is still such a strong channel. It's obviously been around forever, and it seems like a lot of business owners I'm speaking to are seeing that same thing. Another, and I'm just sort of thinking as you're talking, like another strategy I think could work really well for you guys, because you're talking about these like very concrete examples or samples of saving money. One thing that I don't know if this is something you've done or thought about from a marketing perspective is like you guys should do like a monthly, it's like Spotify Wrapped. You should do like a Loop Wrapped every single month and just send like an email that is automated to every single customer saying, hey, you saved $700 in wire fees this month. You saved $1,000 in FX fees or whatever, because you obviously have that data for the transaction volume, but that gives them like a quick reminder every single month. Like I'm using the platform every month. When I signed up initially, I realized how much money I was saving, but now it's part of my system. It's just standard. But if every single month you send them like an email saying, hey, like, thanks for banking with Loop, you saved X amount of money this month, it's a good reminder to be top of mind, and even have like a share button on or something so people can post it or share with other people. But yeah, it's hard to get the word out there. But if you don't remind people, then it's not going to happen. And I'm in the same situation. It's like looking back to 2024, a big part of our business was through referrals. And I'm now going through the process of building like a functional referral program where it's not just like people send in referrals when they feel like it. It's like, hey, we tell them how the process works. They have formal forms. We tell them about it like every 3 weeks or whatever, and keep them in the loop. Because if it's not top of mind, people won't do it. So it's like, how do you make it very easy for them, but how do you also keep it top mind for clients?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the thing I sometimes struggle with on that is like, you don't want to overly bombard your customers, or you don't want to make that like too inorganic. Like the more organic that referral is, like the more likely somebody is to like action on it and actually take it to like I'm going to go and sign up for this product and service. So it's about figuring out like, how do you, and I think you had a good suggestion there of like, giving the data to somebody to say, oh, wow, I saved like $40,000 this year using Loop. I think that's the type of thing that you probably want to do, is just empower them with the data. And I think, but there's a line you have to kind of like toe of, you don't want to be too aggressive of like, hey, here's a thing, like post this on your LinkedIn, because you want it to still be authentic at the end of the day, right? Like you want, and you don't want it to come across like somebody else is like being incented to do that. Like you want it to be like, this is a genuine, like I'm trying to help you as a business. So I think that's like a, to your point, why referrals work and have worked so well is because like that's the ultimate social proof when someone's just willing to say, like, I'm getting nothing out of this other than, helping you as a friend or a colleague or someone I know in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a fine line, and that's where, and the idea around it is like provide value first, and then if it's true value, then people are going to share it. And that's the thing is referrals. No one's going to put their name on the line to send a referral out if they don't actually believe in the product. But sometimes you have to re-remind people that the product is good, which is super interesting. And I don't know, it reminds me of like early days Well Simple. I don't know if you were exposed to this early on in Well Simple, but when they were sort of building out in Toronto, which they're based, and trying to get their first few customers, like they did a very unscalable thing to win their first few customers. Like they used to host lunch and learns at tech companies around Toronto where they would come and buy lunch. And literally the CEO, Mike Catchin, would sit at the or stand at the front of the lunch and tell his story of he won like an investment competition when he was a kid, and he realized there's better ways to do this, and he launched Well Simple and how the platform works. And it's just thinking back on like early days of what you do to get your first whatever one customer, 100 customers, 1,000 customers. Is like sometimes you have to sort of do the unscalable things, whether it's emailing people individually like for references or referrals or telling them about it. But once you hit the nail on the head of what works, like you got double, triple, quadruple down on it and just grow like crazy. And with you guys in the stage that your business at, so you've raised a seed round. What is the focus and plan right now for Loop, and how are you guys thinking about prioritizing after taking VC capital?
Yeah, for sure. Very quickly on your previous point about like kind of doing the things that don't scale acquisition wise, like that's critical for sure to building a company, because it's also what helps you learn about your audience. Like, when you go and you do the lunch and learn or you sit down one on one, you hear that person's reaction to things. It's a way better and faster feedback loop than like putting a marketing campaign out there and hoping like, oh, maybe people are going to see this. So I think that's critical for sure to start. And I think like, dovetailing that into your funding question about, what are we going to do with kind of the capital that we raise, a couple priorities that we have. One, continue to build our product offering out so that it's better at solving more problems for customers. So like listening to our customers, understanding what are the other challenges and pain points in their business, and how can we continue to make their lives easier, save them money, reduce the amount of time they spend running their finances, and help them expand more internationally. Right. So those are like kind of our core goals as a company. And so product development wise, we want to continue to make our product better to serve the things that we promise to serve for our customers. So I think that's number one. And then, focusing on growth, how do we, invest more in channels that allow us to drive more customers into the business. And with that scale, we'll then continue to create this kind of loop of being able to reinvest more into the company and build out our product to be better. The more people that use it, in some senses, the more powerful our platform becomes. So there is somewhat of a like kind of network effect to products like ours as well. So those are the things that kind of we think about in terms of like the use of funds, or your product development, go to market, and last thing I'll mention is there, going back to a previous part of our conversation, is always regulatory considerations when you're doing these things. So when you're building new products, it's not like many SaaS companies where it's just I'm going to put a new line of code in and the product is built. You might need to staff up legal operations, etc., to be able to offer something new to your customers. So that's another kind of nuance of maybe the space that we operate in is you want to be able to offer things. You got to kind of first think about if we want to do this, what are all the kind of parameters that we need to meet before we can actually offer this product.
Yeah, it's another wrinkle to consider as you go through it, which I'm sure is frustrating sometimes when you want to move quick, but you can't move as quick as you want to. It's exciting, and it's interesting now. Like you're seeing the shift in tech with VC and stuff like that. Is everyone seems to be potentially more cautious when it comes to raising money and not just trying to raise as much money as possible and go as quick as possible. Unless you're in the AI space, it seems like everyone's still racing in that world, but everyone else is being a little bit more cautious. But for you guys, like, was it always the plan to raise money and go the VC route? Did you want to sort of bootstrap it and just grow strategically? Like, how did you think between the two decisions? And I don't know, when did you raise the money and how was that process?
Yeah, we've raised a couple rounds of funding. And answering, so the first was September 2022, and then the more recent round was last year, in 2024. The nature of the industry we're in is almost like more of a manufacturing business where you have a lot of upfront capex to build infrastructure before you can actually build a big enough revenue base to be able to cover those costs. So that's like again another nuance. Candidly, I'm the type of person that I don't like spending a lot of money. I'm not the go big or go home, spend millions of dollars and hope it works, kind of go for kind of blitz scaling. I think I'm much more of the mentality of do things in a reasonable, sustainable way, continue to invest and double down on the things that work, and double and double and double and double again until your unit economics don't work. So I'm growth oriented but pragmatic as well. So I actually like operating in an environment where people care about that stuff versus just spend money on growth and don't care about anything else. But going back to, so that might sound at odds with raising kind of larger venture rounds. Kind of a couple of reasons we have to, like I said before. One, you have to build a lot of regulatory infrastructure and product infrastructure, even to be able to just earn your first dollar of revenue. And the second thing is there's also trust and credibility element as well to being able to show that you're a well capitalized company in the space, and you have good backers and good investors. To the trust point before, we don't have a gold tower, we don't have $1 billion of market cap. So things like that are important to establishing trust and credibility.
Yeah, if you're giving your money to another company, you want to make sure they're not some guy sitting in his mom's basement and just coding away, because it could be pretty dicey. Sometimes that works. What's his name on Roaring Kitty on Robinhood, everyone listened to, and he was in his mom's basement, by live streaming. So you never know, it could work that way. Yeah, it's interesting. The credibility piece is huge, and it's the same in every industry. And in finance, it's obviously a little bit more cautious, I would say. But it's so interesting that human dynamic and social proof and all these things is so relevant in every business. Is if your friend refers you in, or you've heard about it online, or you've seen their ads or whatever, you have to have that credibility to get someone to trust to buy your vacuum or to manage your business money. It really doesn't matter. And I think it's super interesting. One thing that I'm keeping a pretty close eye on is, and as a consumer, I'm doing this, is the discovery piece of business or consumer products or whatever is, in my opinion, taking a very hard pivot to social. When I go and try to find a new restaurant to go to, I used to go to Google and see what the new articles are. Now I just go to TikTok or Instagram or whatever. I type in Toronto new restaurants. And the same thing is, I said vacuums. I literally just bought a new vacuum. And I went to TikTok and I saw who was writing about vacuums or whatever. And I felt that seeing a face and a name or whatever gave it more credibility than potentially paid ads or paid articles or whatever it is online. And I'm keeping a very close eye on that concept of investing and trying to figure out how do you build your social proof on social instead of your social proof on the internet, because it's very different and people spend so much time on social nowadays that it's just becoming incrementally more valuable, and it's becoming a search tool. And I don't know if that's something you're thinking about or something that you've found, but I think the next Google experience is actually within social media.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on that point a bit, people are the new brands is kind of the say or motto, right? And I think that that's true across all industries at the moment. People want to see who's behind things. People want to invest and buy products and sell into other people not a faceless brand. And so I think like we definitely have seen over the last 5-10 years, and I think we'll continue to see an acceleration in the building of the personal brand as you're morphing into the products, services, companies that you buy from, right? So, when you're talking about buying a vacuum, right? Like that person that was kind of like, reviewing or telling you about the vacuum, in a sense, is like almost who you're buying for more than, I don't know what vacuum it was, but like your Dyson or Shark or whatever brand it is.
Yeah.
That is definitely changing in the world, and I think like new companies have to think about how they're going to adapt to that, because even in financial services, that's how people want to know who they're dealing with. They want to know the people that they're dealing with, like who's behind this service, who's behind this product. I don't want this, offshore thing that may or may not work. I think the mainstream doesn't want to do business in that way. The mainstream of consumers and businesses want to do business with people they know and trust. It's kind of a human trait. And I think social is enabling that, right? Like before, that wouldn't have been the case for Coca-Cola, because like, that's not really how business, it was not even possible to like have that
Yeah.
direct connectivity to the founder of Coca-Cola. But today, my guess would be like if Coca-Cola was founded right now, the founder would probably be all over your Instagram and your TikTok explaining like why this bubbly soda tastes so delicious and why you should buy it, right? So it's a change for sure in the way that like people interact with brands and companies.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, it was a Shark vacuum that we got.
So there you go.
Uh, and it's super interesting the way that I think about it, and why I think it's so interesting the way that it's going is like historically, if this is the way that it would go, you can sort of buy your distribution, right? Like you can through PE or whatever, you can acquire businesses with this distribution and increase your odds. You can pay a bunch of people to get your word out there and advertise. But the problem is when people are the brands or people are the social proof, the second there's like a paid promotion badge or they're owned by a brand, they're sponsored by a brand, then they lose all credibility. And I don't know if you keep a tab on this, but in the golf industry, this is happening very quickly, where there's all these golf channels and golf influencers, and all the different golf brands are running around trying to win them all as sponsors. Callaway, TaylorMade, Titleist, whatever it may be, they're all signing as sponsors. But the second one of those golfers starts playing Callaway because Callaway signed them as a sponsor, you know that that person's not using Callaway because they think they're the best clubs. They're using Callaway because they're getting paid by Callaway. So they actually lose their influence on selling more Callaway clubs other than visibility, but the actual credibility is dead. So I think the pivot is super interesting that you actually can't buy distribution anymore. The only way to get true distribution is by being the best product.
Yeah.
Because people won't put their brand on the line unless you have the best product, which in the end of the day, I think is best for the consumer, because you're not just seeing ads of people who have the biggest budget. You're actually seeing ads of the best products, which is super interesting.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think like, taking it back to banking, financial services, like same thing, right? Like, TD sponsors, I don't know how many people, how many celebrities they have in ads, how many, like race cars or sports teams they have their logo on, right? But so that awareness is out there, but to the point of like credibility, if somebody in your network or tells you Loop is a better product, I'd assume you're probably going to trust that person more than the fact that like your sports team is wearing a TD on the back of their jersey. And I think that like to your point, that definitely like bodes really well for people who are trying to challenge kind of big incumbents, because you're able to be more nimble and adapt yourself and adapt your go-to-market a lot faster.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's things are changing pretty quickly. And the other topic, and speaking of change, obviously AI and AI implementation and whatever, all the different LLMs that are out there. I'm a big advocate of trying and figuring out what's going to work. And there's a bunch of little hacks that I've used to save a ton of time and money within my business. But I always like to ask other founders of how they're leveraging it, one in their personal life, their business life, or in their company. Like what are the ways that you're leveraging or thinking about AI right now to improve Loop or improve your personal efficiency? Like, is there any like specific hacks or integrations that you're using right now?
Yeah, I'll give you a two-part answer to the AI kind of question. The first part's maybe a bit more generic, which is like how we use it. We use a lot of different tools, whether it's in kind of just asking general questions, doing research, putting materials, campaigns together, helping with software development. Like there's so many different tools that are out there. They're becoming better every single day. And as a young tech company, you obviously continue to like research, look and try different stuff and get more efficient every single day because of them. And I think like that's probably, I said a little bit generic because I would presume that like most modern companies operate that way. I'll give you a second part of this answer though, which is like a lot more specific to financial services, which is really interesting because what I think we're going to see with the proliferation of chat driven AI is a lot of the things that you want to do can be enabled through a chat interface, right? Like I don't know, now with kind of chat GPT's like operator, it can like go out and like buy stuff on the internet for you. It can take your credit card and go wild. It can order you an Uber. It can kind of book you a service, etc. So I think that's going to happen really quickly in the world. I think what's going to be super interesting is to watch for is in financial services. There's a lot of regulation that makes that basically illegal to have like a third party software come in and log into your bank and do stuff for you. And that is going to be a space to watch over the next law because I think people are going to want to do their banking in that way as well. Like if you're paying a contractor internationally and sending a wire rather than logging into a platform and like, typing in their wire information and blah, 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 and like going through steps and click approve. I'm sure you would love to just like chat to your virtual, chatbot assistant and say, hey, I need to pay XYZ a wire. Can you go and do that? Yeah, here's the information. Sure, go. It's done. And 10 seconds later, you're off to the races. So I think that's the ambition. Like that's the exciting future for what financial services could look like, where you don't even have to like log into an app. You basically just, have this other interface through which you can interact with your financial provider. But the regulatory environment is going to be critical to enabling that. Like almost maybe best analogy is like self-driving cars. Like everyone knows that like self-driving cars is the future and where it's going to go. But a lot of it is part of it is like companies like Tesla driving the innovation, and then that's also part of it like governments in certain states or regions being the ones to put their hand up and say like, yeah, we're going to let you do this. And I think that's going to be interesting to watch in financial services too.
Yeah, it's interesting, and self-driving cars is a physical object, so it's very easy to see, and it's so tangible. Like if there were no regulations, there'd be Waymo in every state and city. Like they would just roll them out as quick as possible. But obviously, regulation slows that down. The same thing with Uber. When Uber is going, like regulation slowed that down. And unfortunately for you, like the Canadian banking system is like an oligarch. So, or it's really hard to organize against that, or I guess it's like there's a lot of defense with the government has a lot of banking backing into it. So I assume they're going to put regulations in place, favor the big banks and not favor the small guys, where I don't know if that's something you sort of think about and I guess deal with it as it comes, or you sort of plan for it ahead of time. Like, how do you think about that in terms of you're going against this big guy that they have players in the game, like the government makes the regulations and they want to make sure the big banks, the oligopoly that's already in place is going to win. But is that something that keeps you up at night, or how do you actually deal with that or think about it?
Yeah. So to the point of like whether regulators and government favor kind of the existing incumbents, no question. And that's just like how oligopolies work, and that entrenchment gets created in pretty much any country that has these kind of oligopolistic structures. The unfortunate thing is like it's not about Loop winning or losing, or our competitors, other fintech companies winning or losing. It's more that like the consumer and small business has that bad experience. Like you still have to go into your branch and waste an hour of your day to send a wire. Like that would be the loss in a sense for us as a country or economically, is like that the end consumer and the end business owner are the ones who get disadvantaged by having a non-competitive environment. So I think like that's the argument for like, it's not about like, we need to make sure Loop wins. It's more like we need to actually make sure we have a competitive environment so that everybody wins, right? And we get more productive as a society. So I'd say like that's the argument for like why change needs to happen. And I think that there are people who understand that, and people, policymakers, people in government who want to see that change happen, to kind of make the space better for everybody who's involved. The other thing is like you also want us to be competitive internationally. Like, financial services in Canada is a significant part of our GDP. Like it's a really important, like, Toronto is essentially established as a financial services hub. And if we just fall behind to US, UK, or other markets, that's not going to bode well for us in the long term either. So I think you have to think about that competitiveness through two lenses. One is like, I want to help my businesses and consumers. Second is I don't want us to, our whole industry to fall behind everybody else, because what that's going to end up with is just kind of, we lose out economically as a country.
Yeah, we're already behind and we're falling even further, unfortunately. But yeah, I completely agree. And competition is the only way to sort of push the pace, because if there's no competition, there's no reason to innovate and evolve. And yeah, it's a fine balance. And in Toronto specifically, like you're seeing it with real estate and the condo market and stuff like that falling off because there's more regulations on foreign investment and foreign buyers, and they're the ones who are like boosting up this entire ecosystem within Toronto and Canada. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Luckily, I'm not in government making up these politics or anything like that. But from your side of it, and this might be a personal question, so you tell me how you want to answer it. Like, how do you think about being a founder? Like, what do you want to get out of this? Is like your goal to have like $1 billion exit and become a millionaire and go be on yachts? Like, are you just like a constant entrepreneur trying to find new things? Like, what's your goal in being a founder and first and foremost and finding Loop? And what's your ideal outcome? Or what game are you playing? What are you trying to win?
Yeah, I'd say like there's two things that drive me. Like, firstly, it's like the impact that we have. So like when we see our customers actually win, that's the thing that gives us the greatest fulfillment. Like when we hear those stories of how we help the company expand to a new market, say win a new customer, save a bunch of time, money, those things are the things that kind of like drive me every day. Is hearing those kind of personal stories of people that we're able to support, and that's what makes it all, the grind all worth it. I think that's kind of the first and foremost thing I'd say. I'd say too, I enjoy solving difficult problems and challenges. The space we're in is complex. It's, we spoke about that before, and you have to have a certain kind of personality and mentality to want to work in this space. And I'd say that I definitely, do enjoy navigating a complex environment and figuring out like how you can drive solutions despite many people, the conventional wisdom in highly regulated industries or oligopolistic industries is like don't bother competing because there's no way to do it. It's just like there's a framework, people do it this way, and like, you ask anyone who's been in the industry for a while, they'll be like, can't do it, like you're wasting your time. I kind of like that as a challenge, because I think it makes you be very creative and thoughtful about how you can solve problems for your customers.
Yeah, fair enough. We have very different personalities. You're like, give me the hardest challenge you can find to have the biggest impact. I'm like, let's find out, like, how do I become the biggest fish in a small pond to just try to make as much money as possible so I can live a great life. But everyone has to know what their drivers are and what their games are and what they want to sign up for. I assume this is your personality. Were you this as a kid growing up and in school? Like you always wanted to solve the hard problems and work hard in school? Do you think this is a personality trait, or do you think over time being in the industry, you've sort of drawn towards these bigger problems?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a personality trait. Like when I was like 6, 7 years old, I was like taking apart computers and putting them back together again because I like, instead of Lego, I was dealing with like a real thing that like I could turn on and off, right? So I switched from Lego to like, machinery pretty quickly. I think that's probably an indication that like I was somewhat wired to do this type of thing. And finally enough, you're talking about school. I did well in school when I was challenged, and I did really badly in school when I found something like basic or easy, because I would just like switch off. So like there were certain, like I wasn't like a perfect school student, mainly because like when I found something like kind of not that interesting or not that challenging, I just like didn't even take the time to invest in it. And so I probably had some teachers growing up that were frustrated by me because they saw that I could do it, but just like didn't put the effort into it. And that probably I didn't think about that at the time, but like now reflecting on that, is it just another indication that like I need to be spending my time with things that are difficult to solve and not kind of more routine.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe after Loop, you'll start sending rockets up to Mars or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting to hear. And the reason I asked is like, clearly that's a personality trait, in my opinion. It's like you're either wired this way or you're not. But people have to be true to their wiring and find something that works. And it's really hard to do it. Everyone's like, go follow your passion or do what you love. Like, I think that's all bullshit. You have to try a bunch of different things and figure out what works. And I don't know if it's the passion. Like you never grew up saying, I'm going to go solve the financial banking system for small businesses in Canada. Like that was never in the cards. I never said I'm going to start an offshore staffing company and help people hire people in South Africa. Like you never grow up thinking about doing these things. Everyone wants to be an athlete or an astronaut or fireman or whatever it may be. But yeah, I think you just have to do something you like and you're challenged by and you like the reward. Like for me, I like seeing our revenue go up and to the right and grow month over month. Like that's my driver and that's what I get excited about. But from your side of it, and the other thing I always like to ask, because for me, I always have different business ideas or strategies. I'm like, oh, why is this done this way? Like, there's got to be a better way. And obviously, there's only so many hours in the day. But I'd love to hear from you because you're exposed to so many Canadian businesses and interacting with so many customers and things like that. I'm sure you have a million different ideas. Maybe the listeners can pull something from this as well. Like, if you weren't doing Loop, is there a burning idea or business or strategy that you would want to tackle, or something else that you think needs to be challenged?
Really good question. I think of different things all the time. Again, I would probably go back to like, what is a difficult problem that needs to be solved? Like I'd either go on like either side of the spectrum. Like I'd either think of like these, if I was going to do something after this, it's like I'd do the simplest business where like I require like no thought and I could just do it every day, or I would go to the other side and like go after like something that's 10x more complex, right? So like,
Yeah.
inspirationally, I'm not saying I would want to start companies like this, but like, you think about like a company like Neuralink, right? Like I've listened to a bunch of podcast interviews with the people who work there, the first couple patients of their clinical trials. Like that's fascinating to me because like they're pushing the boundaries of like what's possible from a technology and biology perspective, which I don't know the first thing about brain science. So like, just for clarity there, but
Yeah. Just to preface that.
just to preface it, yeah, like it's super interesting to hear people like smart people who are motivated to solve like this really difficult problem of like people can't, there's people who like are paraplegic, they can never walk again. Like, what if we could solve that? Like that sounds like a really cool thing to work on.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me you go that way. And when you said you either go to something super simple with turnkey or something crazy complex, that's all bullshit. You're definitely the latter, that you need to go something super complex. And I guess is there one that comes to your mind, like top of your mind, that you think would be of most interest, or just that general idea of something that people might have think wasn't possible, but try to evolve it?
I don't, I honestly don't have like one to share. There's probably a list of 20. Like maybe, the problem is like, I'd say like SpaceX is probably on their way to solving it. But like one thing that's always interested me is like, how do you make travel faster and more accessible? So I think that's, connecting people around the world is something that's really interesting. I'm not saying SpaceX is going to solve it completely. So that's, if I
Yeah.
have to give you one thing, that's probably something that I would spend time thinking about. Like even like on a more micro scale, like why does it take so long to get like from Toronto to Waterloo, or like
Yeah.
or Toronto to Montreal, right? Like where it takes 5.5 hours to take a train to Montreal, when like this, if you were in Japan, that would take you like 40 minutes. Like
Yeah.
those are problems that like, again, maybe there's a lot of other people thinking about how to solve them, but
Yeah, for
those are things
sure.
that are
It's
interesting.
yeah, travel's interesting. I was just watching I guess like a mini documentary on YouTube about like supersonic travel. And it's like there's the technology is like available to fly faster. And there's just no incentive to go and build these airplanes, or no one's really working on them because regulatory reasons or whatever it may be. And it's like there's bullet trains in Japan. Like, why isn't there whatever faster airplanes or supersonic airplanes that people can travel from New York to London in an hour instead of six? Like, if the technology isn't the limitation, it's always interesting to see what the other limitations are, and eventually these things are going to be available. I'm not playing that game, and I won't be in those long term games because it's a very competitive space and there's a lot of regulatory reasons. But yeah, it's always interesting to see. Just challenge the day to day that everyone thinks is the norm, and why does it exist like this?
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I would say is that like oftentimes so many people get discouraged by like, oh well, if it isn't this way, there must be a reason. And honestly, like there's not always actually a reason. There's a reason that everybody in like that industry will tell you it's not possible. But all it takes is one person to like have an idea and have a vision. You can go and affect change in different spaces. And I think like we need more people like that, especially in Canada. Like we need more founders who are willing to have that kind of risk taking attitude of like, yeah, everyone's telling me that it's not possible to change this industry, but like I'm gonna go in as an outsider with no knowledge in travel, in healthcare, and whatever it is, and just like try figure out like can I prove everybody wrong?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that was going to be one of my last questions here is like if you were going to inspire, because the reason I started this podcast was I was an employee for a decade and had a great career, and I loved all the people I worked with and things that I did. But I always wanted to be a founder and start my own company. And I think back on it, and maybe it was fear or like social judgment, or maybe I just didn't have the right idea or whatever it was. But it took me, call it 12 years to start my own business. From your side of it, like if you were going to inspire someone to take the leap of faith from being an employee to being an employer or being a founder, what would be your sort of words of wisdom or advice to them?
I would echo something that you said earlier, which is like do something that like fits your personality that you enjoy doing every day. And if you do that, I don't actually think it matters whether you're the founder or employee. Like I don't think that matters as much. I think what matters more is that like you're doing something that you're deeply passionate about, that like you get to enjoy spending hours of your day like solving problems in that space. And I think if you have that framework or mindset of like I'm enjoying this, this fits like what I like and what I like to do, that's going to inspire you to either it's going to inspire you to grow more. Like maybe that makes you like a better employee, it makes you grow faster in an organization, or maybe that ultimately inspires you to go and start it on your own. I think that like candidly you have to be wired a certain way to like found a company and take on what's required in order to be successful as a founder. But I think like, I would always start one step back from that. I wouldn't say like, just go and found a company and figure it out. I would say figure out the thing that gives you joy, that you have passion for, and go pursue that. And in some way, that's ultimately going to lead you to a better place in your career and in your life.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I would even take a step before that, which I think a lot of people struggle with, is like they put their blinders on in their job or whatever role they are, and they just do their own thing. It's like I think the first step is curiosity. It's like if you don't not doing your passion, you don't know what your passion is, you're thinking about founding something, you don't know what to found, just go try a bunch of fucking shit. Like
Yeah.
there's so much information available. Like before this company, I started 4 other companies, and I just like found information on YouTube, and I did my own research, and I started to reach out to potential clients. Like you could just go do it. And what I realized, and to your point before about people will say industries or companies are a certain way because there's how they are. There's not actually that many rules in business, and you can just go do and try and learn and test different things out and figure out what scratches your itch. And I think that would be my point to people, is like just be curious and try things. If you want to be an AI, sign up for every AI platform and realize like how they work and what goes on behind the scenes. And there's so much readily available information. I think a lot of people are just scared to even try and be curious, but I think curiosity creates passion or interest. And if you don't create that curiosity yourself, it's never going to happen naturally.
Couldn't agree more. Curiosity is the key. And with AI, you can like go so deep on like any subject you want. Like literally just like spin up chat GPT voice chat and talk to it for like 4 hours. You can like literally learn everything you want to learn about a particular subject just by talking and asking questions, right? Like that's literally all it takes. It's never been easier to explore that curiosity and go deep on a subject. You just have to start. Like you just have to put the chat up, ask a question, and start going deep down a rabbit hole that interests you, right? And it's awesome because it used to take so long to do. Like you'd probably have to like, who's the right person to talk to? Where are the right resources? How can I do research? Like now I can literally just click a couple buttons and go very deep and immerse myself in a subject. Like it's there's never been a better time to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Our parents had to go to the library. We had to
Yeah.
go to Google. The new generation has to go to GPT. So it will evolve every generation. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. So we'll end it there. Appreciate you jumping on, and good to speak to the guy who's going to dominate and evolve the Canadian banking system. But no, great chatting, Cato, and we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, for sure. Great chatting with you as well. Thanks for the
Have a
time.
good one.